Well, hi, everybody. I'm Roger Marshall, Senator from the great state of Kansas, and welcome to another Ag Talk with Doc show. Today, we have a very, very special guest, a doctorate in economics, PhD in economics, Dr. Art Laffer. Dr. Laffer, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Senator. Pleasure.
Yeah, Dr. Laffer, of course, you're most famous for this, the Laffer curve you did on a napkin. And I think that was with Donald Rumsfeld, and that kind of launched your career. And you started off as an economic policy advisory board member for President Reagan. And
yeah,
of course,
I was also in the White House with Nixon. By the way, I was George Shultz's right-hand person back then. So I've had a long experience with dealing with this administrations.
well, that's great to know. And what I'd like for you to do is just kind of big picture. We're going to get to agriculture, but agriculture is a business, like every other business. We have to understand the big pictures first before we start drilling down on the cost of fertilizer. But would you just kind of share a little bit of your story of your memories as working with President Reagan, and tell us the difference between Reaganomics, maybe what the Trump economy theory looked like, and then today Biden economics, if you don't mind.
Well, Reagan was a supply sider all the way through when he was the president. Now, when he was governor of the state of California and before he wasn't, he was head of one of the largest unions in the United States, AFTRA and SAG. He had a nationwide strike, as you may remember. He also, when he was governor, he raised the highest marginal income tax rate, both personal capital gains and also corporate. He chaired the Equal Rights Amendment. I mean, they were biggest spender. And as the years went on, he modified his positions. He learned from what he was doing. And by the time he got to be president, he was the best president I ever. I mean, just wonderful. He and Trump on economics were just spectacular. And what we did was we cut the highest tax rate. Now, just think of this. The highest marginal income tax rate when Reagan came into office was 70%. When he left office, it was 28%. He cut the corporate tax rate from 46% to 34%. It was just amazing what he did. He went from 11 tax brackets to 2 tax brackets. He brought inflation under control. He and Paul Volcker. Volcker tightened money and Reagan expanded the economy. And so if you have less money and more goods, inflation's going to come down, which is exactly what he did. He did all sorts of deregulation. He was a free trader. As you may remember, I mean, under Reagan, we initiated NAFTA. Now, we had to wait until Bill Clinton got into office to actually pass it. But it was Reagan's pro-free trade position there. I mean, Reagan was just amazing. He pushed bipartisanship. I mean, two of my very best friends at the time were Phil Gramm and Kent Hance. Kent Hance, both of them PhDs. Kent Hance was a student of mine, and Phil Gramm was one of my dear friends. And we needed to have a bipartisan proposal when Reagan came in. So we had on the spending bill, because Phil Gramm was on budget committee in the House, we had it as Gramm-Latta. Del Latta as was the Republican, Phil Gramm was the Democrat sponsoring, and then we had the tax rate bill, which was Hance-Conable. Barbara Conable was the Republican and Kent Hance was the Democrat, because Reagan wanted everything to be bipartisan to push through and get good economics. And at that time, you could find Democrats who were very pro-growth, very positive, very free enterprise. It's a little more difficult today.
Yeah. What would you say about Biden's economic policies? How have those influenced inflation?
Well, he's almost exactly the opposite of Reagan. If you take the Reagan period and play the film backwards, stable prices up to high inflation, that's exactly what he did. I mean, Reagan cut non-defense spending as a share of GDP. He cut government spending except for defense. He increased defense spending and cut non-defense spending. Reagan brought inflation under control. Biden's taken out of control. Reagan got rid of all the controls on oil. If you remember with Jimmy Carter, we had wellhead price controls. We had excess profits taxes. We had a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit in the U.S. We had required planes to recirculate the air. We had gas pricing. Those gas lines were 5 miles long, some of them. We also had it that, the government offices had to have 76% was the minimum temperature in summer and 65% in winter. By law, he had to do it. He wore his little blue sweater. All of these were the antithesis of Reagan, but they all are exactly Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a super hyper active Jimmy Carter. And it's sad, but, we'll get over it.
Wow. Let's go back to the farm economy of the 1980s, and I want to compare the 1980s in the farm economy to today. You know,
Yes.
as I remember back, so I'm in high school and college working on my grandfather's farm. We have the Russian embargo, so we're no longer exporting wheat. This is before Reagan. This is before you guys take over.
Yeah.
And we have interest rates of 18 to 20% for operation loans to borrow it, to buy a tractor. Is history repeating itself? Is inflation going to go away? My farmers are sitting there today trying to buy fertilizer for next year. They described to me their biggest challenges, of course, are the price of fertilizers. Input cost is what they're facing as well. So what was going on in the 80s that drove that high interest rates and compared to today?
Well, we had the high interest rates as a legacy from Jimmy Carter and the very, very high inflation. It was Volcker and Reagan that brought that down substantially. We had the restrictions on energy, as I mentioned to you, all the coast. Those were all Jimmy Carter there. I don't know if you remember the OPEC oil embargo to the United States as well. All of that is hugely impactful on the agricultural sector. The dollar was very, very strong during from 1978 to 1985. I think it doubled in the foreign exchange market, or very close to doubled, which means that agriculture gets really hurt badly because agriculture is an export product. And when the dollar rises in value, it makes the U.S. export goods non-competitive. Exactly what happened in the 1920s. And what's happening today, by the way, the dollar is very strong in the foreign exchanges, and it's very difficult for farmers to get by when you have a very strong dollar. But what happened under Reagan is he got rid of all those wellhead price controls, all of that. I remember I was a consultant to the board of Occidental Petroleum, and I wrote this piece in the New York Times with Reagan's decontrol and all of that going on. I said that the price of oil was going to drop from $32 a barrel to maybe as low as $20 a barrel. Armand Hammer, who was the chairman of the board then, fired me, asked me to leave the room instantaneously. Get the heck out of here! You know, and I did. I mean, what? But as it turned out, the price of oil dropped to $8.
Yeah.
You had a huge drop there. That's what happened under Reagan. Of course, that was really good for farmers. Once the dollar had settled in and stabilized, we got interest rates way down. Price level inflation was going away. It was great for farmers in due course. But there was a time period there that even under Reagan, because of the legacy of Jimmy Carter, farmers got really hammered. And, you know, free trade is one of the single most important things for farmers. And we have always been huge advocates of free trade, as opposed to what now is going on. This is not a free trade administration, this one here. So free trade is what they need. They need low interest rates, they need a stable currency, boom, and farmers can just outproduce anyone in the world.
So, Dr. Laffer, you had the courage to tell Occidental Petroleum that here's the economics. This is what I'm seeing. Oil's going to drop from 32 to 16. And again, I grew up in the oil patch. I remember those people plugging wells, all that type of thing. What would you tell my farmers today? What do you see inflation and interest rates doing for the next 2 or 3 years?
I do not see anything in this administration's policies, and I'm sorry to say this, I do not see anything that addresses inflation correctly. The Fed is raising interest rates slowly, which is the wrong thing to do. Why would they put on price controls on interest rates and raise them slowly? You know, that just exacerbates the pain. If you must do it the way Paul Volcker did. Just release interest rates, let them go to the levels they need to be to bring that inflation down right away. Don't tear the Band-Aid off slowly. Just rip it off, get it done. But that's not what this administration does. That's not what this Fed does. They love being controlling people. They love controlling everything in your life. And, you know, frankly, that means to me that they aren't going to solve the inflation problem. They aren't going to solve the secular decline of the U.S. economy, which is really profound right now. They aren't going to solve the trade problems. You know, all of these things are very much the detriment of the U.S. economy. And I'm concerned. But politics, you know, people deserve the governments they get, Senator. Oof. And, you know, the earth these people are scorching is their earth, too. And, you know, we'll see if the electorate has wisdom this November and changes it. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. But it reminds me a lot of Jimmy Carter in 1978. And then, as you know, Ronnie came on the scene and we really restored America's prosperity.
Those were some great days, and certainly we need a leader like Ronald Reagan again. I've made the statement multiple times that this administration has declared war on American energy, but American agriculture as well. And you've already outlined some of those attacks on American agriculture, but one of them is tax policy. And there's nothing more important to my farmers back home than being able to pass on their farm to the next generation. And we call it the death tax. So this administration is pushing for a more death tax dollars. And maybe what's more important on a day-to-day, month-to-month basis is stepped up basis. What was Reagan's philosophy on that? And again, compare contrast to this administration.
Yeah, I would say that all of our view of the death tax, the inheritance tax, or the estate tax, whichever one it is and what form it takes, is that, there is no tax on earth that I find and that my colleagues find more onerous, more immoral, more detrimental than the death tax. I mean, Senator, you can earn your income, you can pay your taxes fair and square. You can take that money. You can go to Las Vegas, you can carouse, you can gamble, you can drink, and you can smoke. And as far as my federal government's concerned, God bless you, it's your money. You do with it as you like. But if you take that same money, you rat, and you give it to your kids, then they want to tax the living bejabbers out of it. It's just the most obnoxious tax in the world, and you don't get any money from it. All you do is just create hardship and pain, and especially on farmers. Now, we had a problem here in Tennessee. We had a death tax in Tennessee when I came here. And we had to fight like mad with the governor and the staff to get rid of that. And we had a big surplus, et cetera. And we finally got rid of it. We got rid of the death and the gift tax here. We also got rid of the unearned income tax here. I don't know why it's so hard for these people to see it. The death tax collects no money and causes enormous distortions. And it's basically fundamentally immoral. Why shouldn't you, if you've earned your income, you've paid your taxes fair and square, let your kids have it? That's what I do. I have 6 kids. I have 14 grandkids. I have 4 great grandkids. And that's the reason I work. I mean, they're my motivation. They're my dream. They're my life. The whole goal of my life is my kids and my grandkids and my great grandkids. But these governments all think it's immoral to give to your kids, to your family. They're just kooks. I mean, frankly, it's just obnoxious.
Yeah, I remember my grandmother saying, look, we paid for this land now 4 times. We bought it, and then we're paying taxes on it year over year after year, and then we're generating income. That's the property tax I'm referring to. Yep. And then year over year, it generates income, and we're paying taxes on that. I want to go to trade for just a second. I want to just give you a little rope to talk about trade. Again, so NAFTA came about, and now we have USMCA trade agreement. President Trump also negotiated good agreements with Japan, phase 1 with China. This administration really just is now getting a USTR, trade rep for agriculture, on board now. What would be your advice to this administration when it comes to trade, and maybe touch on ag trade specifically?
Well, let me just do trade in general. Yeah. I mean, there are some things we Americans do better than foreigners. Produce higher quality products at lower cost. We do better. There are some products they do better than we do. They produce it at cheaper than we do, and of higher quality than we have. We and they would be foolish in the extreme, Senator. If we didn't sell them those products we are more efficient at producing than they are, and buying from them those products they're more efficient than we are. It's a win-win. It's called the gains from trade. It's called comparative advantage. It's called David Ricardo. This is the whole essence of the gains from trade, and why it's so very, very important for us to have free trade in this world. And I mean free trade, and especially with countries that don't see the world the same way we do. Do you like your customers? Everyone loves their customers. When you do business with someone and they pay you a check, woohoo, you love them. We need to develop warm and good relationships, especially with countries that are not natively as friendly to us as we would like them to be. China's going to be here 50 years from now. So are we. Why not live those 50 years in friendship? Now, I'm not suggesting we should sell nuclear weapons to North Korea. I'm not. Obviously, there are things that are off, but normal products, why not? And then after trading and earning income with them and bipartisan stuff and all that, then sooner or later we can become friends with them, just the way Reagan did with Gorbachev. The whole thing. And then maybe once they become friends, we can see the world in a different light and maybe reduce nuclear weapons, maybe reduce the threat of war. That is not the way this administration has been going. We've got a land war in Europe right now. The way they left Afghanistan was a tragedy. They have done nothing to endear us with those people who do see the world differently than we do. And I would suggest very strongly that we free trade, we lower tariffs, non-tariff barriers, we have as much free trade as we can. And that's where they would open up their markets to our agricultural products. We would open up our markets to their products. I mean, they make good cars over there in Germany and Japan. They really do. And, why not get a deal when you can? And I think this xenophobia, this Russian hatred, all of that stuff is very misplaced when it comes to trade. What Russia has done is really wrong, invading there, and we should stop them and oppose them. But that doesn't mean we should never ever think of being friends with Russia and trying to convince them of the truth and beauty of our ideas, not fight them and shoot them into believing our ways, because that won't work.
I'm going to get you out on this question, Dr. Laffer. You've been very generous with your time. I want to talk about ESG for a second. Environment, social, and governance. It's a new concept. And what I see happening in the real world is my people in the oil and gas industry can't get loans because the banks don't want a high score. And now we have the SEC wanting to give everybody an ESG score. How does an economist view this, and how in the world could you ever implement it?
Well, I'm not an expert on ESG, and I don't think that's the way to do social governance, is putting in ESG. I really do think we should make sure we're a colorblind society, a gender blind society, a race blind society. I really have always supported that. I wrote Enterprise Zones, as you may know, which Jack Kemp and Ronald Reagan did. I wrote that in early '74. I've always been for enterprise zones, tax-free zones in the inner city. I like substantive changes. I like things that create the prosperity rather than try to force people to redistribute income in one way or another. So in general, I'm not a big fan of ESG, but if it's put in, I can deal with it. I'm on a number of boards, as you probably know, and we can deal with it. It just is an added burden and added cost. But
so at the end of the day, it's going to hurt our GDP, I'm afraid. It's going to make us less.
Well, I don't think it's going to be big. I do not think it's going to be a massive thing like raising the tax rates to 90% or anything like that. I don't. I think it's a silly regulation that should be solved by free markets. You have with Reagan. Let me just tell you what, with Reagan in '87, it was a perfect time. Remember that market crash and came down. The market fell 35% in the first 2 hours, and Alan Greenspan had just been appointed head of the Fed. And oh my God, everyone was panicked. And Reagan's comment was, "Don't just stand there, undo something."
Yeah.
Don't do something. Don't. Whenever people make decisions, when they are either panicked or drunk, the consequences are rarely attractive.
Yeah.
And that is the truth of the government every which way. And they're trying to do all these things. They should just leave it alone, let markets solve themselves, and let people work with other people, and it'll come about. We've made huge progress in this country on so many fronts. And it's not been done by regulators. It's been done by people dealing with people. Yeah. And, all of these issues, I mean, whether you're black, white, male, female, tall, short, old, young, it really shouldn't matter if you're doing business with someone. And it's just, it's a natural right thing for people to do. Right. And I don't think we need ESG from some bureaucrat there telling us, here's your score. Your score is 83.6, and it has to be 85 to get you a passing grade. If they do that, people will adjust to it, but it's not the right way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Laffer, that's exactly what my mom taught me to do, is just treat everybody equally. Lady Justice has a blindfold on, so I think that's a great thing. But I appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us today. I learn something every time you come to Capitol Hill and we're able to sit down with you. We enjoy reading what you still got out there, and we need to learn from history always. So we appreciate everything you do for us. It's been a great talk. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Senator. Great pleasure to be with you.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.